everyone, it's Diane, and I have two journals to show you today. One is a custom order, the other will be in my shop. But first I just wanted to show you the dies that I picked up the other day when I had to go up to Horseheads. I had to go to my craft stores to get some more of my 3-in-1 glue. I can't get it locally. So I went up there and Hobby Lobby had their Sizzix dies. I think it was 30% off. It wasn't 40, but I think it was 30. And I don't have very many dies, so I studied them and I picked up a few. So I just wanted to show them, and when I show you the books, you'll see why I wanted to show these to you. So I got this one, which I thought was really interesting, and I did some practice cuts on some coffee dyed paper, just a scrap of coffee dyed paper. So I can see this would be really pretty with colored cardstock or printed cardstock behind it in a journal as a pocket or something. So there are 4 different dies, and it's Thinlits Mixed Media number 1, Tim Holtz Sizzix Alterations die. And then I got this one. I've seen this in a lot of other projects that people do, and I've always thought it was pretty. And it is called Wildflowers. Again, it's Tim Holtz by Sizzix. I didn't try that one yet. And I didn't try this one yet. But I can build flowers, and I've seen this a lot too, so I've wanted it. Small Tattered Florals is what it is. And then I got this one, which is not Tim Holtz. It's Lori Whitlock, but it is Sizzix, and it has all these little circle dies in different sizes, and some are scalloped, and it had 4 corners, and it has some stamps which I may not even use, but I did like the nested circles. I thought I could make some interesting things with that. So I did practice with them a little bit, just tried them out a little with cutting out some circles and the little flower. There's a little flower that came with it too. It was in the center of the circles, and some book corners. So now let me show you the books that I made. These are the books. I used 2 reading primers from the 1920s. And this is why I wanted to show you those dies, because I used the flower here, but I wanted to add some color to these. They're faded blue, and it's a blue on blue design on the cover, so I thought it needed some more color for interest. And of course I did use fabric for the spine, but it needed more. I put some blue vintage rickrack here, but on the corners I really needed to use the metal reinforcements because the corners were frayed. But to add a little more color, I decided to try those die corners. So I cut them out of red and put them on the book corner, and then put the metal on top, and I really like the way the red peeks out. And then I needed to bring the red over here, so I added another piece of vintage rickrack, which was the baby rickrack. And then I added this piece of blue tatting, which came off of this raggedy looking thing that I got in a box of sewing supplies at the flea market. So I glued that down and then put on the red flower. So I thought it really brightened up the cover a lot, and I like it. It's called The New Path to Reading, Book 1, and it's got a little squirrel, a rabbit, and a chick. Looks like they're doing a Ring Around the Rosie or something like that. It's so cute. And I did the red corner and the metal corners on the back too. The back has definite signs of use and age, because it is a very vintage book. And then I used fabric on the spine, and then this piece of trim from Hobby Lobby. There are 3 signatures. I loved the end papers, so I did not do anything to the end papers, just left them. Here is a pocket, and I used a lot of the illustrations from these books. They were the orange and brown and black illustrations, and this one has a couple of the phrases that went along with this. Here's pages from another vintage book that I got at a flea market, and I used them quite a bit in the book. This is glued to some blue airline paper. Airmail paper. I keep calling it airline paper. And there's a tag that says, "And the story begins." You can write your name and information on the back of that tag. There's some crochet trim there. I used a lot of papers from Stampin' Up! From an old set of papers, and I don't know what they were called, but they're not available anymore, but these are the scraps from them. I've been hoarding them. They are old school papers, and the children look like they're from maybe the 1950s. That's what the illustrations remind me of. So these are just some scraps of the papers, and this was one that was a cut apart. So you will be seeing these papers throughout these two journals. They were really fun to use. I'm not hoarding anymore. I am using. There is no point in hoarding, I've decided. I say that until I come across something I really want to keep. So this is one of the papers, and it has this on the back of it that was printed on the back. They are double-sided papers, and I just cut that out and glued it on. And these are all vintage, and this came from the Joan Walsh England pillow thing that I bought. It was a piece of fabric that you were supposed to cut and make into a pillow, cut and sew. And I cut one of the patchwork pieces that was printed on the border. This is vintage, and this is a vintage trim. I believe someone sent that to me. I love it. It's a knit trim, and it has several colors in it. And I use different book illustrations, children's book illustrations. And here's a Dick and Jane workbook page with a little tiny library pocket with a D is for duck glued on, and another scrap of the Stampin' Up! Paper in there for journaling. I wanted to make these books simple, but I had so many children's book illustrations that I had to, there was a good opportunity to use some, so it is no longer simple. It's got little pom-poms here. Those are not vintage. So I did a little bit of stamping. This says "Be Happy," but mostly I glued images on from vintage children's books instead of stamping. There is some stamping on the corners. This is from one of these books that I used to make the journal, and some vintage rickrack. And this is a page from, kind of got stuck here. This is one of the end papers from Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. I had used that book cover, there it is, for another journal, and I love this illustration, so I tucked that in here, and you can write on the back of it. I also use some one-sided papers that I like the colors of. This is one of the lined papers that I got at the estate sale. A couple of pictures from the Dick and Jane workbook. And this is from a Kate Greenaway book called A is for Apple, and so it just had letters of the alphabet, and each page talks about something with the apple pie. A is for apple pie is what it was. So H is for had it. There's a little boy digging into the apple pie and eating it. I made pockets with children's book pages. This is one that was illustrated by Eloise Wilkins. And this is a vintage index card. It is not coffee stained or distressed. It is vintage. And an illustration from the children's book. A little scrap of vintage fabric here. Another children's book illustration. Really pretty picture. Some vintage fabric up here. I used a lot of vintage trims and fabrics in this book. This is vintage gift wrap up here. I used a couple of the scraps from the Stampin' Up! Paper to make this little corner pocket. And here is the back of the signature. I used one of the end papers and made a little card to tuck inside. Second signature, this is not a pocket or anything, it's just an illustration on the front. It's glued to some craft cardstock, which I border cut, edge cut, punched or whatever. This is vintage wrapping paper. Again, I've been hoarding this. It's my favorite. I have a couple pieces, like 3 pieces of children's vintage wrapping paper that I absolutely love. Vintage fabric, vintage rickrack, and this is a vintage school lunch ticket. Trying to think of her name. Twins for Me Too on YouTube. I know her name. I've swapped with her before. Anyway, I'm still trying to think of her name. She had got these like giant rolls. I can't remember how many rolls of these tickets at an antique store. And so she was selling them from her, I think from her YouTube. Her name will come to me, I know. I'm sorry. I know your name. Christy. Christy Biggs. Twins for Me Too. All right. Sorry, Christy. This is from a Dick and Jane book, but it's a reproduction one. It's not very vintage. I think it was, I don't know, from the 90s. This has a little card in there, but I think I glued it in when I glued the yo-yo in there. I'm going to have to try to get that out. If not, it's just stuck in there. But this is one of the little brown 2x2 envelopes that I sell in my shop. And on these, some of them I just used a book page tucked in, and I did not put any journaling space on them. You can glue whatever you want on them, but I just like the pages the way they were, and you can read the page and then do what you want with them. There's some vintage trim here. Here's a page from that vintage book with the little men building letters. That's not a tuck spot, it's just a decoration. I love that little illustration. G is forgot it. He chased all the children away so he could have the apple pie. That was rude. There's journaling space on the back of that tag. Vintage fabric. This was actually a sleeve from a vintage doll dress. And you can see, I don't think it was ever finished because it had this casing there sewn on, but the elastic wasn't in it. So I thought it was a cute little flip there. Vintage fabric and vintage lace there. It was really fun to use these children's book pages. I always have fun with the children's book pages. It takes a while because I have to go through my pages and my books and pick out things and cut them, and it always takes a while, but the results are worth it. So I didn't want to cover up this paper, but I wanted you to be able to use it. There is space here and here for writing something, and then I just used washi tape to attach this graph paper as a flip so you can write on that and then still see the pictures underneath. So this page from Stampin' Up! Looks like report card. I thought that was cute. Vintage wrap, gift wrap, and you can just attach whatever you want to here. Here's another piece from the vintage doll dress, and it was gathered. It was the skirt. So I just made sure the gather stayed in it. Vintage fabric there. There's another little pocket and a little tag that did not get glued in. Everything just kind of repeats itself, but I'll let you see all the illustrations that I use. D is for dealt it. She's dishing out the cake, or the pie. Ouch. Another yo-yo here. There's lots of room for journaling, and there is a card or something in every pocket and tuck spot. This is a vintage gift sticker from when I bought vintage gift wrap, and there were some gift little cards to write on and little stickers to decorate your packages. I'm not sure which one is going to be for my customer, but one of these will be listed in my shop. They're both called The New Path to Reading. That one said book 1 and this one says primer. So here we have a circus elephant and clown with a wagon and 2 little boys running toward them. The same kind of decorations on the front. This one has the uniquely handmade, and this is one of the little circles that I cut with my die cut, with my die, but I didn't put it on this one yet. I will. So I'll just quickly go through this one. There's the front with the circus elephant. Look at the elephant dancing and laughing with the children. The story begins. Another page from this little man. These little men are building the letter F. That was a really cute book. It had a pocket in the back with all of these pieces that the children could actually build the letters. But when I got the book, the pieces were not there. Vintage fabric. This is the Paul Revere fabric from the Bicentennial. That's something children learn in school. Another little envelope with a vintage cut down index card. There goes the train. Just another book page in there. Hans Brinker illustration. A apple pie. Vintage gift wrap. I love him. There's some vintage gift wrap with Mary had a little lamb up here. And I just scattered some of the flowers that I cut off from the background paper. This one didn't get a yo-yo on it, which means that the tag didn't get stuck in. So I'll glue a yo-yo here. I kind of forgot about the yo-yos once I got going. F found it, or fought for it. So these 2 boys are fighting for the apple pie. Maybe she's the one that baked the apple pie. There's the vintage school lunch ticket. Little pocket here with some math problems. This is a vellum pocket. Vintage gift wrap here with a little cowboy. This is Sally. Sally had her new shoes on. C is for cut it. They're not fighting for it anymore. This is from a Norman Rockwell book. It's one of my favorite of his pictures. The doctor and the little girl with her dolly. So cute. I didn't do any process videos with this journal, so you didn't get to see this journal at all prior to this. But I really needed to get it done quickly because today's Friday and I want to spend the rest of today and tomorrow cleaning and organizing in my craft room and doing some other cleaning in the house so that I can do a tour, well, so that I can have it organized for the main thing, and then do a tour and show you some of the new organization that I'm using, since I have a lot more stuff to store since I have inventory for my shop. So one of these books will be listed in my shop, and I will link my shop below. And then once I get my room organized, I want to get that done this weekend so that I can start on Monday on a new and different project. I have a custom order to do for a Bible themed journal, but she does not want to journal in it. She wants it to be just something to look at, kind of like a coffee table book, she said. So that'll be interesting and fun to do. And so I want to be able to focus on that next week. So I hope you like these books. Please give me a thumbs up if you like them. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already subscribed. And please come to my shop and check it out and see what I have. I have lots of goodies in my shop. Thank you so much for your time today. Bye-bye.